Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Jackie Knechtel, and we're going to talk about how she embraces effortless flow in her life and business, and she'll show you how to do that. She built her business without following that normal formula that they tell you in business books and made it successful. And she also knows how to fit in when you might stand out and embracing your quirks, and how she turned down a $10 million funding deal to get something better because her intuition told her to do so. We'll also look at how she found her business partner. There's quite a story there that's very spontaneous, and her intuition just guided her in that. And we'll also look at how she lives effortlessly and how you can too. So welcome, Jackie.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're so welcome. And if you don't know Jackie, she is a master of living in the flow. I bumped into her in Lisbon and we connected there at a conference. Didn't know her before. And here we are talking on the show. She is a master manifester, super connector. And she also confided to me that she's a recovered perfectionist and recovered people pleaser. So maybe we'll sneak in a little talk about what that means later. But let's talk about how you've built your business with a business partner, and we'll talk about how you met that business partner in a moment. But you haven't followed the traditional route for building this business. So how have you built your business into a successful business?
Yeah, it's been a super organic process how we've built our business, and just from the start, it came together and we knew that we had to work together. And so we decided, after we met, we mapped out a vision, and that included writing a book. And then we were going to start a speaking tour 9 months later. Well, fast forward, a month into knowing my business partner, Justin, we ended up doing our very first talk. And, from there, now we've spoken in 10 countries and, have taken hundreds of students through our online training and taught thousands of people around the world this methodology that we created. But the way we did it was really not following the formula and doing all of the things that people think that you need to do first. And what we really did was follow our excitement. And so flow principle number 1 is to follow your highest excitement in every moment. And our excitement was taking us to Costa Rica for Envision Festival. And we thought, why don't we just speak there? But we hadn't really ever spoken anywhere before. And so the normal path would be to do some sort of speaker training and to practice going to Toastmasters and really just build yourself up as a speaker first. But we just decided we were going to go for it. And so we reached out, we applied, but they said that all of the speakers had already been chosen. And I think that's where most people shut down. Once they hear a no, it's, end of story, case closed. And we thought, well, how else could this happen? How else could this be possible? And so we asked around in our network if anyone had any connections to Envision, and we were connected with the founder who put us in touch with the speaker coordinator, and she got on a call with us, and we just shared our message about flow and effortless living. And she was so interested that she ended up moving the whole schedule to open up a prime spot for us, gave us an all expenses paid trip there. And, we had our very first speaking gig there, which then led to a bunch of other speaking opportunities at different events and conferences and festivals. And it's been nonstop ever since. So it was really just stepping out and doing the thing that we were most excited about, not taking no for an answer, not feeling like we had to have all of the systems in place. I don't even know if we had our website up at that point, but it was just honoring that pull, what we were most drawn to do.
I love those questions. You said, how else could this happen? How could this be possible? Tell me a bit more about how you think those work when you ask those questions of yourself. And you're asking, who are you asking when you ask those questions?
Yeah, so those questions are really just kind of breaking you out of limitation. And that's really what flow is. It's really this new operating system for consciousness that allows you to experience a more limitless reality, right? Because your rational mind will say, oh, well, speakers are already chosen, so now I have to wait for next year. But when you're holding the space for infinite possibilities and realizing that everything is actually possible, that allows for magic to happen and spontaneity, right? So even where I met you at the DNX conference in Portugal, how that came to be was I was supposed to be going to speak at an event in Greece. And a friend of mine said, oh, well, hey, I'm speaking at this thing in Portugal. And she's like, you should come. And I was like, well, do they need any more speakers? Same thing. She said, no, it's been booked up for months. And I was like, well, that doesn't really mean much to me. Would you be open to reaching out to the organizers? And so she reached out and asked if they needed any speakers. And they said no. All of the speakers were booked, but the MC just backed out. And would I want to be the MC for the event? And I was like,
Oh,
holy shit, and in that moment, I was frozen because I'd never emceed an event before. This was 500 people. So it was the largest event I would have spoken at. And, I'd never done this before. So it was terrifying to me, but also thrilling. And that's really the sweet spot for flow, is following the thing that is in your highest excitement, but also scares the shit out of you. So by asking those questions, how else could that be possible? That keeps you in a more expansive, limitless reality, rather than going into the logical, rational mind that will just shut down all of these different possibilities.
and I remember when you were the MC, you admitted on stage in front of 500 people, I have never done an MC before and I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, I also sang on stage, which is something that I never imagined I would do.
Right. And it was fun,
It
and you
was
had us
great.
do little exercises. We'd have a 3-minute break between the speakers and you'd have us stand up and talk to our neighbor, or I forget what else you had, but it was all quite experiential, which is quite hard to do with 500 people. So you weren't just an MC, you were an engaging MC.
And that was the thing is, and here again, doing things that are different, right? Not following the mold. I could have read about how to be an MC and followed a formula for how to do it. But instead, I just felt into like, what would I want if I were in the audience participating? How would I want to experience this event? And so I brought the things that I know and that I love and that I would want to experience. And so I ended up leading with a meditation, and people were crying in it and coming up to me after like, wow, I've never experienced anything like that before. And certainly not at a conference. It was like they'd never expected anything like that, or authentic relating practices. And so doing things differently allowed for, a completely different experience and for people to be exposed to completely new practices. So I think we'd even did breath work on one of the breaks. So it's certainly not your typical conference, but rather than fitting into a mold of how I think it should be done, I felt into what would feel exciting for me and what I think would serve the audience. And it ended up being really, really fun and expansive for people.
I would definitely say so. I think it helped really improve the event. Not that the event wasn't amazing to start with. So you mentioned that this is something that's both terrifying and exciting when you're following your flow and doing stuff spontaneously and going into these infinite possibilities where you didn't take no for an answer and you didn't require yourself to have all the experience and training to do it. I'm kind of curious, what's the difference for you between terror and excitement?
Well, to me, they're actually the same, right? Because they're all, it's just energy. So someone once said, I can't remember who it was, but that anxiety is just excitement without the breath. So it's really just energy moving through your body. And so if you can refocus that energy, right? So when I got on that stage, initially, you know, it was more backstage where I was feeling really nervous. But then once I got out there, I just, you know, took a deep breath, and that relaxed me. And then it felt like home, like being on stage. I had a theater background. So for me, it took me back to being in that place where I loved being on stage and performing. And suddenly it wasn't like this big, scary task that I was taking on. But really so we say that the greatest flow accelerator is finding that sweet spot between the thing that feels really scary, because it's an edge that you're leaning into. It's a fear, but it's also something that you really want. Like I was approached by someone who works with TED, and he finds my story compelling, and he wants to help, you know, get me on the TED stage, and not TEDx, like TED. And so that scares the shit out of me. You know, it's like, that wasn't even on my radar of something that I thought I wanted. But, you know, once I heard it, it was really exciting to me. But then I'm also finding myself like, oh my God, that's in 2 months. I can't do that. You know, it's definitely a growth edge, but it's that thing that I can totally see myself doing it. But then when I actually think of myself up there, I'm like, I can't do that. You know, and any doubts and fears start to creep in. So, but that's the thing that's going to be the greatest growth edge for me. So when I can really step into that place, that's where I'm going to experience the most flow. But most people don't go into that because fear holds them back. So they hold themselves back and stay in their comfort zone rather than pushing their edges and playing with those boundaries.
Yeah, it's almost like instead of having the horse of fear holding you back and keeping you in your little prison cell of comfort, you're like jumping on the fear horse and riding it into the mountains of growth. a lot of practice at that. So I'm very well versed in that now. I've always been someone who's pushed my edges in every way. And, you know, I've traveled the world for the last several years and have been to over 60 countries, and I've jumped out of planes. I've done canyon swings across gorges and done night dives. What's a canyon swing?
It's like a bungee jump, but it's like swinging across a gorge.
Oh, like a trapeze artist.
Something like that. I've also done trapeze. So and that was also terrifying to me because I was afraid of being upside down. I have a memory, and I don't know if this actually happened, of being a child and flipping on a swing and hanging upside down by my hair. That may not have actually happened, but there was this very real fear around that. And for a long time, I was terrified of being upside down. So what did I do? I signed up for aerial silks classes and anti-gravity yoga. And so I pushed that edge. And the first time I had to do a backflip in the class, I was bawling my eyes out. I was so embarrassed because I was crying about doing this, you know, going upside down in this silk hammock. But consistently lean into those edges. I was also really terrified of being underwater. I was caught in a rip current when I was a kid. And so I had this deep fear of being held underwater. So never became a great underwater swimmer. And my first surf lesson in Costa Rica, when I was on the sand, you know, I don't know if you've ever done a surf lesson, but I was on the sand doing the preparations, you know, how to jump on your board. And while I was on the land, I was crying because I was so afraid, because I knew what was coming. They were going to make me get in the water, and then, you know, the waves were going to come. So even before I got in the water, I was terrified, but I pushed myself and I did it. And I did a dive training. And there was a moment where I was, when I had to take the regulator out and let it go, I was like, are you kidding me? Are you insane?
This is when you're like 5 or 10 feet down and then take the oxygen out of your mouth.
Yeah. And I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that. You've got to be insane. And it took me a good 5 minutes of meditating under the water and just really having that moment with myself to talk myself through it, to actually do it. But in the end, I did it. And then I went, I've had some amazing dives since then.
It's a magical world. I mean, I learned to dive, and the first dive, it was choppy, and it was kind of, the water was moving around under the water, and probably I was nervous. And I was really afraid I'd throw up inside the regulator, which is not a good idea. So I didn't throw up in the regulator, but as soon as I got to the surface into the boat, I did throw up, and I felt really shaky. And I'm like, I'm not doing this again. But I went back 2 days later and got my qualification and overcame the fears I had. So
life becomes so much richer when you really lean into those edges.
And just to be clear to people listening, we're not talking about something that is, rationally really dangerous. Like, I don't know, can't think of anything really dangerous, but I mean, it's not like you take a machine gun and shoot bullets at yourself or something, hoping to miss. It's like you're doing something that's an irrational fear that on a rational basis, other people, have done this, or you can tell, it's not highly likely you're going to injure yourself or die, but you've got some.
And not even talking the pushing your physical limits, because you want to be afraid if you're going to step out on the wing of a plane. I would hope that some fear mechanism kicks in. So, those are there to support us. And, some of us are just adrenaline junkies and live for that thrill. But the thing is, fear is the biggest dream killer. So fear holds us back from everything that we want in life. And the thing is, it's not the fear, like you're saying, that, you would expect to face when you're facing a hungry lion or jumping off a building. You want that kind of fear as a protective mechanism. The kind of things that hold us back are, fear of being seen, right? So if you have a fear of being seen, you're not going to be going on Facebook Live and filming podcasts and putting yourself on stage, because there's that, fear of rejection, or all of these deeper psychological fears that, feel really real, but, are just holding us back from everything that we want. Yeah,
or fear of messing up, or that's another big one for a lot of people.
And I'm much more a behind the camera kind of person. I love taking pictures and taking videos. It's not.
Jackie, I just want to let you know you're actually in front of the camera right now. I know you thought you were going to be behind it.
That's actually way more comfortable for me. When I started, doing these videos and stuff, I was so uncomfortable. And, it's still not super natural. There's people that love it and thrive in front of the camera. It still feels a bit awkward for me, especially when there's no one on the other end, like when we're filming our course or something and I'm just looking at a blank screen and talking, it feels really uncomfortable. But for me, I know that this message is so important to share that I can push aside any of my own stuff and lean into that fear and that discomfort as a growth edge. And, then over time, it becomes easier, right? So now I'm so much more comfortable than I was before. And as I continue to do it, who knows, maybe one day I'll even love being in front of the camera.
It's possible. I had some friends recently, they did this 90-day video challenge where you publish a video every single day for 90 days. If you miss a day, you have to start again counting at 1. So, and I was like, shit, that sounds very frightening. I'm a little nervous being on video. What if people don't like what I have to say, or I look stupid, or I'm changing my gender. So which gender am I going to be when I'm on the video? Oh my God. But something in me said, yeah, you need to do this. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I think I'm on day 83 right now of this 90-day challenge. And yes. And I'm just echoing what you said. I'm so much, having done that, I'm much more comfortable doing it. And there are other people doing a similar 90-day challenge where they're writing, content, blog articles, because they're afraid of sharing their writing in public. and they committed to publishing something every single day. And it's amazing the gymnastics our egos will go through up to make up an excuse why we can't do that, or why we can't do it today, or why it's not good enough to publish, or I'm not feeling good, I can't do a video today, or whatever the thing is. Or the other thing I've seen, I didn't do this because I opted to do Facebook Lives. I figured, let's go in the fucking deep and do the hardest thing. That way, any other videos will be easy, having done live ones.
Oh yeah.
Plus, I already know from having edited video in the past that, you know, creating 1 minute of video can take an hour of editing. So, you know, my inner perfectionist would just go nuts on video editing.
I totally get that.
People also make things so complicated. I don't know if you've seen that in your life or other people's lives, that in business, they instead, you know, there's an easy way or there's the hard way. A lot of people go for the hard way. Very
much so. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're working to shift here, is to bring people into a new paradigm of effortlessness and, you know, be done with the hustle and grind and struggle and working out of alignment so that things feel challenging. And, you know, one of the things is really by staying in your zone of genius and doing the things that are naturally inspiring to you and exciting to you. And I think that's one of the reasons why my business works so well, because Justin and I are very clear on what we're great at. And we stay in our lanes, we stay in our zones of genius. And so we naturally complement each other in that way. So he's doing the things that would normally paralyze me, like back-end tech stuff and, you know, copywriting and things like that, where I'm naturally an extreme extrovert. So it's totally my zone of genius to be out in the world at conferences with hundreds or even thousands of people and just being open and sharing this message. And so we just do the thing that feels effortless to us and what feels like play. And then things work so smoothly.
Now, I love that. And you mentioned earlier, why fit in when you can stand out? How does that relate to your zone of genius? It sounds like that's maybe part of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people try to fit into a mold, or they read a book about like how Elon Musk was successful, and then they try on, you know, what it's like to be Elon Musk. And, you know, Elon Musk is a very special type of person, and not everyone can be like that. So following the Elon Musk formula doesn't work for everyone, or whoever it is. You know, you might be inspired by someone and trying to build a business or do things the way that they do, but that's not living in your zone of genius or doing the thing that actually lights you up or is exciting. You're just doing the things that you think you should be doing because you read a book or you heard it from Gary Vaynerchuk, or, you know, whatever it is. So really, or, you know, we see this a lot with our clients too, this wanting to look and be a certain way because you're afraid to truly express yourself. And that's one of the things that I admire so much about you is, you know, especially in the shift that you're going through and being so visible and sharing it so openly. It's, you know, really vulnerable, I imagine. But that fearlessness and that really just showing who you are is inspiring, you know? So if you're operating from a place of not wanting to be in your truth and who you are, that's going to create an energetic barrier that people aren't going to be able to feel who you are. And I'm really weird. And so, you know, the more chances
you are,
I'm a super
What's the
oddball.
Weirdest thing about you, Jackie? Do share.
The weirdest thing about me, I have a quirky sense of humor. You know, I've done some really strange things over my life.
What's the strangest thing you've ever done that you feel okay to share with our audience?
The strangest thing I've ever done. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in high school, I just kind of had a thing where everyone else was like, I went to Catholic school, so we all had uniforms and everyone looked the same.
That's pretty strange to start with.
Yeah, well, that wasn't really my choice, but in the end, I'm grateful for it. It was an amazing school. But
Mm.
I don't know if you can imagine this, but I was super into punk rock, and
A
you
punk
know,
rock Catholic schoolgirl.
I had a super short pixie cut. I had my eyebrow pierced, and it's such a change from who I show up as now. But there was this nonconformist that I wanted to be able to express myself in a way that I didn't feel like I had the capacity in this school where everyone looked the same and dressed the same, so I would just do weird things just to see if people would still like me. Like I walked around with a rubber duck on a leash at one point. um, and the irony is people were more curious and I had more friends, and yeah, just by being my weird quirky self, people can feel who I am, and they can connect to me and relate to me. And so when you're operating outside of that and trying to be a certain way because you think you have to, or I have friends who go and speak on stage in Burning Man gear. So you think just because you're doing like a professional speaking gig, or speaking at a corporation, that now I've got to button up and put on a suit, or it's staying true to who you are no matter what, that you will draw in the people that are so fully aligned with you that they're going to want to buy all of your products. They're going to want to engage with whatever you're putting out there because they're connecting to you. And the thing is, I think if and coming from a former people pleaser, I really in the past I really wanted everyone to like me. So I can understand why people would want to try and make their content so it suits everyone, or don't want to say the wrong thing because then it'll trigger people, or maybe they'll lose some of their audience. But the thing is, if you're truly being yourself, you may polarize some people, and you may lose some of your fans or your customers, but they were never truly connecting with who you are anyway. And that's really stifling. So by being authentically you, you're going to draw in your exact right people who are going to be super loyal and super committed.
I think that's a great way to look at it, and to just let go that people pleasing. And it doesn't mean you have to go to people bashing or whatever the opposite of people pleasing is, or that
Right.
opposite. It's being your true self and letting your
Right.
light shine.
And I think
And
if
I
you're
guess that's what a lot of people are afraid of, really letting their light shine, their inner genius shine out.
yeah, I mean, there's so much baggage that comes along with that as well.
So speaking of letting your light shine out, you were funded for $10 million for your dream business. You had this dream you'd been working on for 6 years. Someone was going to fund it for $10 million, but your intuition told you to turn down that deal, which took a lot of balls, I would say.
Yeah, if I had them, definitely. It was,
Well, they're astral balls.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was definitely a bold decision, and one that a lot of people couldn't really understand. Um, but it was so true for me. And what happened was, I've been holding this vision. I'm still holding this vision, to revolutionize the way therapy is delivered for special needs children. That's really centered around caring for the caregivers as well as the children. And this offer for funding came through, and on paper, it really looked like everything that I'd been holding out for years. And I checked in with my body, and I wasn't excited. There was nothing about it that was lighting me up. And I kept checking in because here's everything I thought I wanted. And I even got reflections from colleagues of mine that are, really successful coaches. And they reflected back to me that I didn't seem really lit up by this. And I just knew I couldn't accept it, because even though it was like 90% of everything that I thought I wanted, it wasn't a hell yes for me. And so being able to say no to the 9 to make space for the 10, because I have this radical trust that I would rather hold out for the thing that may never come. And it may never come, and that's okay. But I would rather hold out for that than sacrifice what I truly want. And so I was able to say no to that, to go and coach on a tech incubator in Chile for 3 months where I wasn't going to be even paid. So, try explaining that to people, they didn't get it. But then,
yeah, let's see. We've got $10 million funding, 9 out of 10 for my 6-year dream, or we've got unpaid trip to foreign country I haven't been to before.
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy decision, but I knew what I was feeling drawn to. And now, we work with so many tech companies and founders that, I didn't even realize there was a whole world out there. That's why I first heard of Bitcoin and 3D printing and all of these things that I was like, whoa, where have I been? This is like, there's all of these things that were so inspiring to me. And now my favorite people to work with are these people who are working in emerging tech and, all of these disruptive industries. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't followed my intuition, which led me to Chile. And also, very shortly after I turned down this offer, I was at Summit Series in Utah, and I was introduced to someone who, said it's our destiny to work together. And he introduced me to a neuroscientist who was working with this cutting edge technology. And then I met a geneticist who was mapping the autism genome. And like all of these things were so much more of a hell yes for me. And so even though the vision hasn't fully actualized yet, there's still threads that keep unfolding, and I keep meeting people that are more fully aligned with that. So being okay with the uncertainty and not clinging and being attached to it actually showing up in a certain way allowed for other possibilities to come through. And also, just not being attached to it ever happening. This clinic may never actualize, and that's okay, because I'm trusting in my guidance and what is actually inspiring me in the moment, which now, is sharing this message of flow.
That is intriguing. So you're not, if this lifelong, the 6-year dream you had doesn't happen, you're not attached to it not happening because other more, other exciting things happened.
Right. And so often, we get stuck on, well, now I've invested so much time and energy into this vision or this project or whatever this is, that we feel like we have to stick with it, or we're flaky if we don't stick with the thing we said we were going to do. But that can be a trap, right? So being able to still hold the vision, right? I'm not projecting as much energy into it as I am with flow consciousness, because that's really where my excitement is, but I'm still holding that vision. And just last year, I was invited to Jordan to potentially open an autism clinic, and I'm exploring other possibilities with people who are doing cutting edge things in the autism space. So I'm still holding the vision. I'm not projecting as much energy into it, but I'm also not attached to it happening just because I've been saying it for so long. People get caught up in, well, I've talked about this, so now I look like a failure, or I look flaky, or, get caught up in what other people think rather than what you really want.
I love that. And are you attached to you manifesting it, or like if it does appear, do you have to be the executive director or whatever the role would be?
No, I've always said that, I feel that I'm here to birth this vision into the world, and I want zero to do with the actual implementation or execution of the vision. So that's always been my thing. And one of my gifts is I'm a weaver. I'm a super connector. And so I have a capacity to, this strong pattern recognition that I can see connections in people and resources. And so if I'm just the person who calls together all of the people to make this vision a reality, that's okay too. I don't need my name on a center. I don't need any glory or fame. It's just, I feel strongly that this is something that needs to be birthed in the world. So if someone else does it, amazing, not attached.
Wow, that's very flowy. So I love how you're a super connector. It sounds like you use that talent to connect with your business partner who you didn't even know. And I believe you were in Bali and a fan said, let's have coffee in New York. And you said, sure.
Yeah. She reached out. And
she reached out, and this was a hell yes for you to have coffee with her, or what?
In that moment when I said yes, it was like, sure, why not? I had this flexibility in my schedule. At that point I was fully nomadic. I was traveling around. I was in Bali and I was going back, what was then home. Well, I didn't actually have a home, but I'm from New York. So I was going back to visit friends and family, and my schedule was completely open. So I said, sure, I'll meet you for a coffee, no big deal. But then when I got back to New York, it was complete mayhem, trying to fit in all of my friends and family and clients and business meetings and things. And my schedule was suddenly jam-packed. And I was sitting, and I remember sitting on the curb on the street in New York, talking to my coach. And I don't know why I said yes to this woman. I just don't, I don't have the space in my schedule right now, and he was saying I needed a filter to just kind of see who's coming to me and what the actual purpose, because I didn't even know why we were meeting. But intuitively, I just said yes, and I made the space, and I honored that commitment. And I met with her. We had a really beautiful time together, and I was sharing about flow, and she's like, whoa, you need to talk to my coach, Justin Fairman, because he speaks about flow in the same way that you did. And so she put us in touch. And, it's just funny to trace back those moments of, what if I didn't meet this woman for coffee? What would my life be like now had I not followed that? And, let's say, like my coach said, I needed a filter, and she didn't have a real reason for wanting to meet me. And I filtered her out of my schedule. Oh, wow. What would my life be like, right? It's like one of those sliding doors moments.
Mm-hmm.
And so really just trusting that intuition. And sometimes you don't know why, and it doesn't make sense, but there's a greater wisdom in that. And so that led me to this connection with Justin, who's now my business partner and one of my best friends. And, we're doing this amazing work in the world.
That is amazing how your intuition, and you didn't even know why you were meeting this woman, and you didn't really want to meet with her. I mean, she was fine, but you didn't know until you met with her what the why was, but you still went ahead and trusted your intuition.
I didn't even ask why. And that's the thing is, I tend not to research things, or if I'm connected to someone, I don't really look them up before. I just trust that there's a reason why we're connecting, and that'll play out as we're, just organically in conversation or something. So I tend to not ask many questions. I have a deep intuitive knowing, and that's kind of how it shows up for me. And I've learned not to question it, because a lot of times it just doesn't make sense. So my intuition shows up strongly as it's a clear yes. I don't need to know the how or the why, and I just go with it and see what happens.
Now, that is something I know some of our listeners have challenge with. They get an intuitive message, but then their ego mind's like, oh, why are we doing this? It doesn't make sense. So I don't, is this really my intuition speaking? All those doubting voices come in. How did you ever have those doubting voices, Jackie? Or
totally. Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you overcome that?
Yeah, so those voices were really coming from fear and doubt and all of these other kind of denser energies. Back when I was living in a place that was out of alignment, I didn't really know who I was. And I was, trying to play the game more. So that's when it showed up for me. I was also kind of cut off from feeling. I'd experienced some traumatic situations, and like I just completely stopped feeling because I didn't feel like it was safe for me to feel. So I just wasn't even in touch with my body and sensation. So if someone told me to, feel my feelings and, rather than think about something, I just didn't even know what that meant because I didn't have that access. So it was really a process of my own healing and integration and working through those things, that as those, that fear, that resistance, that doubt, and all of those things kind of cleared out. And I really learned how to feel by just being with my feelings. Then I learned to actually tune in, because that made the way. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do to clear the space for your intuition to come through, but it's really just taking the time to learn how it shows up for you, and learning what's fear and what's resistance and what's doubt and all of these other things. And the difference is intuition doesn't communicate in emotions. Intuition will communicate through a felt sense, through a sensation. So if you're experiencing emotions like fear, it's a sign that your rational mind is interpreting this intuitive feeling. So it's really about tuning in and feeling, does this feel light and expansive and open and free? Or does it feel dark and heavy and contracting? And learning what that shows up like in your body and tuning into that felt sense. And then when you start to have thoughts, that's just your rational mind saying, oh no, you can't do that because that doesn't make sense. So it's learning to not listen to the mind, which will, it's inherently limited based on your belief structures. So your body's wisdom is so much more profound. So when you can push aside any of the second guessing or the doubts or the thoughts that are coming up and really just go with what your body wisdom is telling you, that will profoundly shift you into flow. But it's really a lot of the flow that we teach is about doing the deep inner work to heal and integrate these beliefs and traumas and things that are clouding your intuition, but also eliminating the noise in your system. So we have so much, background noise, and by eating really clean, eliminating toxins in your life, there's all these ways that you can become more of a channel for your intuition to come through.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed someone, his name's Jeremy, a few episodes ago, and he did like this 18-day fast. Within a few days of not distracting himself with food, he was getting all kinds of intuitive messages. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying you need to stop eating, but we often use food to cover stuff up or numb out emotions.
Yeah, I did a 5-day water fast, and it was profound. And it just shows you all of the ways you, like you said, are habitually using food or just eating because you think you have to, and just the programming and conditioning that's there. And there's so many different ways that people choose to numb out and not feel, because we're taught that you don't want to have these emotions like sadness or fear or anger, but they're just feelings. They're nothing really to be scared of. And if you just be with them and show up in acceptance and unconditional love for whatever's there, it actually dissolves and they move through pretty quickly. But it's in that resistance and not wanting to feel it that they get stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend called Russell who just wrote a book called The Sober Entrepreneur, and he was using alcohol and working to numb out his feelings. He doesn't think he's got some, I think his business does about 4 million a year now, but he doesn't think he'd ever have built that business if he hadn't been able to feel his feelings and pay attention to his intuition and have clarity. So I think there's a lot of value, both personally and in business. So I know you're the queen or princess of effortless living. I wasn't quite sure which title you had today.
And we're going to go with the Empress.
Empress of, I love it. Empress of effortless living in Effordonia. I guess that's the country where effortless living occurs the most, right? I know from my own work, there's just so much in that entrepreneur mindset that you're supposed to hustle and struggle. And if you don't work hard for it, it's not worth it. And all those Puritan beliefs that get pounded into us certainly in America, and I think in other countries and in school, right? I mean, a lot of the school messages, you're not supposed to succeed through intuition and creativity, and non-conformity. You're supposed to conform and work hard and suffer. Be a good Catholic girl.
Actually, I was just reading an article, or I just skimmed it, so I don't want to quote it because I'm probably getting it wrong, but it was something that NASA gives this creativity test to their astronauts, and they gave this test to 5-year-olds, and they all passed with flying colors, and then they repeated it, maybe at like 10 or 15, and just like as the years progressed, they started decreasing, to the point where it was just completely stifled. And that's what happens. Yeah. And it's like we're taught in school that you've got to work hard and to get a gold star, and then you're rewarded for putting in effort, and you start to link your worth to achievement and putting in effort and working hard. So these beliefs become so deeply ingrained that we just don't even think it's possible to experience wealth or success or joy or fulfillment in an effortless way. So it's really, we're working to create this new paradigm where people are living from that place and really working to shift those deeply ingrained cultural beliefs.
So how do you shift those beliefs? Because I'm imagining some people listening, if not most people, probably do work long hours in their business and do find parts of their business a struggle.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much to it. There's, so we talk about this inner flow, which is working through beliefs and emotions and different traumas and things. And so just digging up what your actual core beliefs are around work, around relationships, around, love, life, whatever they are. We have these beliefs that have been programmed in through culture, media, religion, our families, all of these experiences. So getting to the root of what those beliefs are. And, we work through them at the emotional, energetic, mental, and physical level to really rewire the neurology and to eliminate these beliefs. But then we also have a principle-based system. So by following all of these different things, like following your excitement, learning to tap into your intuition, it starts to shift those. Because if you're living out of alignment with what you actually want to be doing, it is going to feel like work, and it is going to feel like struggle, and you're going to have to hustle and make it in order to make it work. But when you're truly living in alignment and you're not doing something just because, you're afraid you're not going to be able to pay your bills, so you can't do this project that you really want to work on because you don't think you can get paid to do what you love, or, you're working in a job or, pushing and struggling because that's how the money's coming in, and you're afraid to leave that to do the thing you really want to do, or, you're doing something just because it's more socially acceptable, or you don't want to disappoint your parents or whatever it is. When you're living out of alignment, it's going to be a lot harder to come into flow. So there's, a lot of moving parts to that to work through.
Yeah, I mean, I've met a number of people who they have careers that they're sort of like the career their parents wanted them to have.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really light their fire.
I have so many friends who are in law school or went to law school or medical school or something just because they're from a line of doctors or lawyers in their family. They couldn't pursue their musical career or whatever it is that was what they truly wanted to do because they didn't want to disappoint their family. They didn't think that they could, it's too competitive or they're not good enough.
Too risky.
Right. And they just didn't think they'd be able to support themselves. So instead, they're just kind of slowly dying inside because they're living out of alignment. So really the work that we do is to help people navigate that and come back to what is true for them. And, as you start to make these inner shifts, then your external reality shifts to match that.
Yeah. I mean, living out of alignment just becomes soul destroying and aging. I think it destroys people's health as well.
Absolutely.
You can see this in people who are stuck in careers because they're afraid to change, and they're just often their health declines and they grow older than some of their peers who are following their joy. So.
Yeah, and you're just living in a stress response, which is toxic for your body and creates illness and disease. So it's really, it's kind of mission critical to do this work and examine.
Yeah.
You owe it to yourself to really come back to that place where you're operating from what's true for you and what actually lights you up. Imagine a world where everyone was living on their purpose. Like, how amazing would that be? And in their joy, I kind of get excited. I know a lot of people are like worried about the machine age, the rise of the machines and the robots, and people are going to lose their jobs and everything. But I think, wow, what an opportunity for people to actually live the life that they want and pursue something, that's inspiring to them that may not have felt like an option before.
Do you think in the future the robots or AIs will be able to follow their joy as well?
I'm not sure. I don't know. Honestly, Justin and I were reading an article recently. I forget, it may have been like Lynn McTaggart or something. And it was like how these, I have to read the full article, but these ducklings or chicks were socialized with a robot that was like programmed by a random number generator to just kind of move around anywhere. But then the chicks, were put there just after birth and thought the robot was its mother. But then the curious thing was then the robot, which was programmed to just kind of move all over, started spending more time in the area where the chicks or the ducklings were. So very curious, very interesting how, the chicks were able to interact in consciousness with this robot. So,
yes.
So yeah, I'm not sure what we're living in an exciting time.
Yeah. I mean, there's that book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, that Ray Kurzweil, if I put his name, I think I got his name slightly wrong. I'll get it right in the show notes. But yeah, some people, Kurzweil, yeah. Some people do think that machines will have a spiritual aspect once they become sufficiently conscious. But maybe that's a discussion for another time. Though I will say I've studied plenty of research on the ability of humans. I didn't know ducklings could do this, but it's definitely been statistically demonstrated that humans can modify random number generators by meditative and conscious thought. And if you take like Buddhist monks who've meditated for decades, they can be very effective at tweaking with a random number generator and having it not be totally random. Or the other experiment I remember is that someone set up random number generators around the world. Maybe there's 10 of them around the world or whatever, and they just leave them running. and then they look at the news and see if something that would affect billions of people, because it's a big newsworthy story, happens, and then they look back and see what happened to the random number generators and was it statistically likely that they did what they did. And one of the examples was back whenever the who was that American football player who was accused of murdering his wife and her boyfriend? OJ, yeah. When that verdict came out and there were riots in LA afterwards, when the verdict was announced, those random number generators went totally non-random.
Wow.
Yeah, because billions of people were watching TV at the same moment, waiting for the verdict, and they either really liked the verdict or they really hated it. And that burst of emotion just, shifted that reality. So it's very, that's all stuff from IONS, which you're probably familiar with.
Yeah.
Like Institute of Noetic Sciences.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, we have come close to the end of our time, but I do have a few questions, and I know you want to share how people can find you, and so do I. So why are you proud to use your intuition in business, Jackie?
I'm proud to use my intuition in business because my innate guidance system is so much more intelligent than my rational mind could ever be. So it gives me access to so many more possibilities and exponential growth.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, as I think you may know, I'm on a mission for all entrepreneurs and business leaders to openly use their intuition at work, partly because they'll make more money and they'll have more joy and less stress, be healthier. But also, I just believe if every business leader used their intuition as well as their rational mind, they'd make less stupid decisions that hurt other people on the planet. So what would it take to make business intuition more openly used this year?
I think more conversations around it, really. There's just, our society is trained and taught to respect the intellect and logic and reason, and that's great, and there's definitely a place for it, and there's a place for strategy. It's not saying that you're never going to use these things, but it's really some of the most brilliant minds of all time. Einstein was a huge proponent of intuition, and Steve Jobs, and all of these really amazing innovators and creative thinkers are operating from this place. So really just bringing these conversations to the forefront and shifting that focus on why intuition is important, because people don't even realize that they are intuitive. So I think people are so cut off from that because we're trained to think, to think things through rather than to really tap into our intuitive guidance. But I think, from the top down is really having more people speak out about the value of intuition. But then I think also from the ground up is really shifting the focus for children and allowing that creativity to flourish instead of stifling them and kind of
more tests, more standardized tests. That's what we need. No.
Yeah. And really just, I think the shift starts from both ends and bringing it back into the school system and allowing for more of that, the creativity and intuition to be valued at that level.
Yeah. No, I think if we can shift how children are nurtured and learn, I don't want to use the word educate because it sort of smacks of telling them what to do, and they need to learn to create on their own, I think, with guidance or whatever, or aid. But that, I just was thinking when you were saying that, that program we have in the United States, No Child Left Behind, which sounds kind of all fuzzy and quite nice, but in reality, it's like okay, you must follow the rules and do the standardized tests, and there's no freedom for creativity for the teacher or the children. And it's almost out of 1984. Like, you know,
kids are trapped in a dark room, you know, expected to sit in a seat for 8 hours a day. And, you know, I worked with special needs, and there's just not a place for a lot of these kids. So they learn differently. And so they're just kind of pushed to the side. They don't know what to do with them because they're trying to fit them into this conformist way of being, and their bodies need movement, and they need proprioceptive input, and just sitting at a desk all day doesn't work for them. But then they're labeled as, you know, that they have special needs or something. So it's really, there needs to be kind of a system-wide education overhaul. And I think there's a lot of people that I know, my colleagues, that are working on, you know, creating different kinds of schools where kids are out in nature and they're learning differently, and they're bringing in things that, you know, might be more valuable to them in the world, like emotional intelligence and, you know, maybe coding or something. And so bringing in different things, and kind of doing schooling differently.
and as entrepreneurs, even if, you know, if we're not involved in education and schools, we can still shift the culture in our company and empower the people who work with us to grow those skills.
Absolutely. I mean, I think just even doing exercises like Tom Chi's rapid prototyping or something, and things to build your divergent thinking, lateral thinking skills. And really, when you're in brainstorming sessions, like really tossing out the most ridiculous ideas without criticism, because that's where so much innovation comes from, right? So the most absurd thing can be thrown out in the room, and someone might be like, oh, well, wait, that could actually work. And then, you know, it's just challenging the status quo, not being afraid to say the thing that sounds stupid or silly, and just thinking bigger than you could even dream was possible. So being willing to sound ridiculous, there's so much value in that.
Like an iPod doesn't need an on-off switch. What a ridiculous idea. And yet that was something that someone tossed out at a meeting at Apple, and then it doesn't have an on-off switch.
Yeah, I mean,
it didn't need it.
There's so many things, and it takes that willingness, and also kind of a safe environment, right? So I think that's something that companies and people can build into their corporate culture, is this container where it's safe to share ridiculous ideas and to think outside of the box, and where that's valued, to foster that divergent thinking and that creativity, because that's where true innovation and disruption comes from. And you know, everything starts as an idea, and you know, you don't have to know the how, but it all comes from an idea. So just being willing to share your most ridiculous ideas is how it all starts.
So before we go to how people can find you, I just want to apologize for all the fireworks going off in the background. I was going to speak to that earlier. It's not gunshots, guys. It's fireworks. The Cuscanians love to let off fireworks. They don't need any
There they
excuses.
go, right on cue.
There they go. Bomb, bomb, bomb. They really love doing it at 4 a.m. too. So supposedly it's for religious reasons. But I think it's just they're following their joy.
Festive.
Yeah. So if people want to find you online, what are the best ways to do it?
They can go to our website, flowconsciousnessinstitute.com, or we have an upcoming round of Flow Mastery, which is our core 8-week online training, and that's flow-mastery.com. You can find me on the Facebook or Instagram, social media. Feel free to follow me there, reach out, say hey, share what insights or impactful things that you heard today, or just say hey.
And I understand you and Justin are working on a book that's going to magically appear sometime this year.
Yeah, we have a lot of cool things in the works. We have a book. We're planning on doing some research later on this year, and hopefully building out a train the trainer program really soon.
Ooh, fabulous. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Jackie.
Thanks for having me. It was great to see you and catch up.
Yeah.